Hey now, Rob here, Rob School of Music, and we are live with the incredible Mr. Jeff Schroeder from Smashing Freaking Pumpkins. Holy crap. Hello, how are you?
I'm doing great. Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah, brother, thank you so much for your time. So, when compiling stuff for this, there was just so many directions this could go, and I'm sure, your experience and story is going to be mind-blowing. Um,
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, I can't wait. So we're
I don't
we're
know.
a music school. We do lessons. We do one-on-one private lessons in person, and then during 2020 and part of 21, we were fully virtual. And during that period of time, I started doing these interviews just to kind of bring the bigger music world closer to my students, and they absolutely love this and rewatch them, and it's like a master class every time. So the first thing I like to start with is, how'd you get into music? Was there a particular record or a show or something that made you say, this is what I want to do with my life?
I think just through context really is how I got into music. I think when I was a young child, it was the late '70s, early '80s, which was, maybe I'm just nostalgic, was a high point,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
music. And I had an older brother who's 8 years older than me, who was a Kiss fanatic. So that combination, late '70s, Kiss. I mean, I literally grew up with that music in the background. And, like my dad took my brother to see Kiss in '77 at the LA Forum with Cheap Trick. And we had posters in the bedrooms. So in addition to that, it was Kiss, Zeppelin, UFO, you name it, like kind of the pantheon of late '70s kind of hard rock and stuff. And then kind of going into the early '80s, there was, some of this kind of emergent new wave, like like bands that were actually really popular, though, like the Cars, um, like Flock of Seagulls, even stuff like Tom Petty. My brother was, kind of, there's a lot of good rock going on. And then once it transitioned, into the early '80s, like '82, '83, with the rise of kind of like this kind of newer metal bands, I was just already fixated on the guitar. And so by the time I was 8 or 9, I was like, I gotta get a guitar, and beg my parents. And so they finally they bought me a Harmony acoustic guitar, which is still, it was still the era of where you would look at the catalogs that would come to the house,
Sure.
and it'd be, clothes, household goods, and then at the very back it'd have like 2 pages of like some real, like one electric guitar, one acoustic guitar, one amp, and so they had this Harmony acoustic guitar, and so my parents actually got it for me, and that started the journey. Probably around 1982, '83, somewhere around there.
That's awesome. It's funny, when I
Yeah.
when I do these talks, Kiss comes up all the time, and I'm a Kiss guy. I took my son, he's 10 now. When he was 9, I took him to Madison Square Garden for his first show, and it was Kiss. And I taped him on my phone as the curtain dropped, and I start with Detroit Rock City, and just I have that forever preserved. So when he's a rocker down the road, I could be like, this was the moment where it happened for you.
Yeah, and from it, I mean, those pictures and those images from those records, because that's all I had were, my brother had all the LPs and then the
Right.
posters, and so you just stare at the one picture over and over and over again. And I didn't get to see Kiss until the first reunion in '96,
Wow.
and I got to see him at the Forum, and you know what? It completely exceeded my expectations. It was so good. They were so great when they came back, and yeah, to this day, even though my musical interests have grown in many different directions, there's just something about the sound of the band, of the voices, the music, that I really just really is like a comfort thing to me. And when you really think about a band like Kiss, they often get, criticized for their lack of musicality, and obviously, putting a lot of emphasis on the commercialization of their products and whatnot. But when you really think about it and you go back and you listen to the catalog from the '70s through the '80s, you know, even into the some stuff into the '90s, there's a lot of great songs, a lot of great music, a lot of great playing, and sadly I feel like that gets overlooked. But they have, I mean, if you put together a playlist, it's a long playlist. It's not 5 great songs or 10 great songs. You're like, I could be into 25, 30 great songs, and then it's like, okay, what, like deep tracks, great songs.
Yep.
I mean, so yeah, I think that there's such a great band, and it's so interesting to hear how even for you and your son that it's kind of a legacy that gets passed on from generation to generation because it's something about it still translates.
Absolutely, but you know what? It's tying it into your story. It's good songs. I mean, these timeless bands, as with Smashing Pumpkins, good songs live on, and
Yeah, yeah.
they generations, fads. When it's all said and done, at the end of the day, a good song lives, and that's really about it. Um, and I want to get into all of that, but let's continue on the timeline. So you got the
Oh yeah,
harmony
sure.
guitar, because dude, I have ADD. That's why I have. If you see me looking to the side, I have a list because otherwise I'll just sit here and we'll nerd out over cool stuff. So
Yeah, we're like 45 minutes into like the Lick It Up album.
yeah, dude, I've been guilty of that for real. Like that's not even.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you got the harmony guitar. Was it lessons? Was it self taught? What? How long before an electric guitar? Was it acoustic? Like really go deep on that.
Yeah, sure. So I got the guitar, and guitar culture back then was so different. There was maybe, okay, Guitar Player was definitely around, and maybe by 82, 83, maybe Guitar for the Practicing Musician, if you remember that magazine,
Mhm.
was around, but it kind of really, I didn't see that too much until a few years later. And so the acoustic came with like a folded piece of paper, kind of like the bad picture of how to like hold the guitar, how to hold the pick. One pick came with a pick, one pick, and maybe how to play 3 chords. Like an E chord, a G chord, and a C chord. Maybe D, not even D because it was too hard.
Right.
They had like kind of 3 chords and maybe like a song chart to Red River Valley or something like that. And that was really what you got. And so I think I could play E and G, kind of figured that, and then could play, kind of start making out riffs on the low E's. As many kids tend to do. You start kind of like, okay, I can work chromatically up
Yeah.
and down the low E string and kind of figure out a riff here and there. But I kind of just banged around for a few years, and then I did ask for an electric, and so I did get an electric, like a Strat copy and a little Fender amp, like a little Fender Sidekick 15, which I still have somewhere. I actually even I have all my guitars too. I have the harmony, I have the
Oh, I
Strat, the
love that.
Japanese Strat. I keep everything, and so I then it was like the same thing, and I think one day my brother had a job, and one of his coworkers played guitar, and he came over to the house and he showed me like Power Chords. And he said, "Oh, if you like hard rock and stuff, 90% of hard rock songs just play these power chords." And so once he showed me that, was like, okay, a big revelation. You could move that around. And then it took like you jamming on the low E string, you could, okay, start moving some chords around. But then around 87, one day I went to a local music store, and I was just in there, um, looking at kind of guitars, and this guy, freaky dude, comes up to me and he looked like long hair, but he didn't look like a regular metal guy. He looked like he was like from the 60s or something, or more quirky than that. I don't know if you know, there was this band out in LA called Red Cross, and they kind of like dressed really weird and stuff. So he came from more of like this kind of early alternative background. And he's like, "Oh, you play guitar?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm just kind of." He's like, "Who do you like?" And I'm like he's like, "You like Van Halen?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I love Van Halen." So he pulls a guitar off the wall, plugs into it, turns it up really loud, and starts playing like the intro to Hot for Teacher and
Ah,
Eruption, like right in front of me, which I had never seen anybody do. And he was a teacher at the music store. And so I went home and I told my parents, like, "Look, I gotta I got to take lessons from this guy." And so they did. And and I came from a very kind of lower class background. There wasn't a lot of extra money for things like that. And my dad was such a great person that he would work extra jobs on the weekend inside in addition to his regular 9 to 5, which was more like, 7 to 6 kind of job. He would on the weekends either, deliver the LA Times or, drive a airport shuttle van to get this extra money so I could have things like guitar lessons.
Wow.
And so it was, so for all the parents out there that really, are working hard to make sure that their kids can stay in lessons, know that they're, down the line, they're greatly appreciated. and, and, but once that I started doing that, and that was like around 12, 13, it was okay. Um, Obviously learning, I kind of knew a bunch of chords because, by then I'd started looking at magazines and kind of picking things
Mhm.
out with tablature and stuff. But then it was okay, learning extended chords like major sevens, minor sevens, dominant chords, learning the harmonized major scale, learning modes. And then what was so cool about it, because he he could obviously play all that metal stuff and was very into it, but he was into even like cooler things at the time, like Uli John Roth era Scorpions
Nice.
and but then turned me on to, he's like, it's great, we'll learn Dokken and things like that and Rat, things that I was into, but he's like, you should also check out this really cool band, the Yardbirds, and Jeff Beck, and and Jimmy Page played in this band, and Eric Clapton, and so he would show me these Yardbirds tunes and other bands like Mott the Hoople, and so I got a much more rounded musical education. But I think kind of connecting the fretboard, chords, scale harmonies, whatnot, really took me a long way into basically allowed me to, any band I was into, I was already kind of ahead of the game because I could always play in key. I could figure out what key a song was in and play. Even if I wasn't playing great things, I could play in key.
I love that though. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
that's a huge thing that we try and do here with our students is we try and give them that rounded education because a lot of people will come in, they see someone on Instagram doing something that probably that person didn't even really do, it sped up or some kind of wizardry, but we'll leave that for another time. But and then we try and be like, okay, well, do you know where that came from? That came from here. And I think just the music history element, connecting it to the theory will open up the guitar in such an incredible way. And then to hear, someone of your stature saying that, that's just total validation that it works.
Oh, it's something that never ever leaves you. And I think it even pays off. It pays off a lot in the beginning because you immediately start sounding better. And what we would do really cool exercises, like he would be like, okay, let's take the key of C, and he'd write out like a little chord chart. And that he'd say, your homework for the week is I want you to write out it, compose and write out a solo over these chords. And then and then when you come in next week, we'll play, and then you play your solo, and then we'll talk about what you're doing. And, it was great. So I had, and just because then you start saying like, well, why are you over that chord, why are you starting on that note? And you start
Right.
learning like, oh, like the intervals and these things that I'm kind of playing these shapes. You start kind of connecting like the inner structure of it. And yeah, it was really great training. And so it's really good early on. But where it's really paid dividends, like kind of having that training is now I've been playing the instrument a really long time. And then you're dealing with the different set of issues where you're like, man, I'm playing the same patterns over and over, and I'm doing the same thing over and over. So I need to expand my musical vocabulary, which is really hard to do if you're completely self-taught. If everything is just complete intuition, and there's some people who can do it, and don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean that you can't, like you have to. But I feel like having some structure allows you to go like, you know what, I'm gonna now tackle something. Like I took 3 years of jazz lessons when I lived in Chicago a few years ago. I just was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. And I was not a great player at it because it's so difficult, but by pushing myself and allowing myself to explore new territory and learn about kind of more extended harmonies, and then really learning more about how chords work and how chord progressions can work and flow, and key modulations can work. It
Hmm.
really translated back into just my rock playing too, in a
Yes.
way that, yeah, that's not like fusiony or, but just there's like kind of a bigger awareness. And I think those things are hard to do if you don't have some kind of basic groundwork foundation from which to work on,
Oh my God.
and yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I interrupted you. Go.
No, 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 no. I'm good. I'm good.
Well, I was just going to jump off what you said. Like I was very similar story. Lessons, hard rock, Metallica, like
Yeah, yeah.
when I was coming up, you know, guitar music, like, the 90s stuff was happening. And then the late 90s stuff started to transition into like the Korn and all the downtuned stuff. But
Yeah.
while that was popular, I was watching Behind the Music on VH1 and falling in love with all the 80s stuff. And then my guitar teacher was an 80s guy. So it was this full thing. But then when I went to college, a music degree, I had to focus on, had to take lessons in one particular instrument. It wasn't a lesson, I can't find the right word, but I did jazz guitar because I was like, let's see what this is about. And it just changed my whole, like,
Oh my
the
God,
instrument
right.
just turned inside out. And now as a
Yeah.
teacher, like, I make sure every student who comes in here is getting a little sprinkle of that, whether they want it or not, because they're going to thank me for it later, because it just changes so much of what rock guitar, can and should be.
No, absolutely. And the fundamental thing, because which as and maybe you'll disagree, but coming from someone like myself who had a long history in playing rock, and is in rock you tend to just blow over a key, E
Mhm.
minor, and you go, and if you're you're either stuck in the 12th fret pentatonic, which, but if you know more, you can blow an E minor all over the neck, which is great. And a lot of really great guitar players are in that mode. Um, but then when you start learning something like jazz, where you're like, okay, you have to start playing changes over the changes and really outlining the harmony with your lines, that can be really hard because you're used to just like, oh
Yeah.
my God, like I only got half a bar in, I gotta change, I gotta
Yeah.
change keys, and so it really has to restructure your mind, but it really makes you so much more aware of what you're playing.
Yes.
And you have to learn how to, and it really comes down to listening, like how to, because I know myself, one of the is sometimes you're just so focused, you're like, okay, I'm trying to play well and play the song and play in time with the band and stuff. So you become very kind of focused. But once you start learning how to play this way, you have to be able to do that and hear how you're sounding, and your improvising is sounding against what's going on. And so it's really, sometimes you think it's all about playing in the mind, but it's also about listening,
Yes.
learning how to hear better. And that's, you would think that something like that isn't something that's a skill that's learned, but it is something that's absolutely something you could work on.
Absolutely. Listen,
Yeah.
listen, dude, like, wow,
Yeah.
like this is so cool because
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
when I'm sitting across from someone or any of the teachers who work for me, I really instill how important listening can be, because, and especially with that, yeah, we'll shred E minor all day long. It's fun, it's cool. But when you have to change, like you said, half a bar, oh my God, something's coming and you're not ready for it. If you're not listening, you're going to miss it. So you're missing the purpose of the exercise. But then
Yeah.
that can also be very intimidating if you don't know what to do with it, because all of a sudden something that was so comfortable is now brand new and challenging, because you have to change everything, that rewriting of the mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool stuff.
Yeah, it's tough. So, um, oh, but to get back to my story, so, I did, after I took lessons from that and I got that kind of foundation, um, then I started more just playing in bands and getting like kind of like, say, like real world experience. And when I started playing, I graduated high school in 1992. So when I started high school, it was the very tail end of the 80s
Hmm.
kind of shred guitar era, high technique. And then by the end, it had totally shifted to the other, to the other side of things. And but I was very excited about the music, and kind of some other things that were, there was a more creative element to the instrument, say, than maybe some, or a different type of creative. I wouldn't say more creative, because I really don't believe in that. I actually think a different type of creativity
Hmm.
towards the instrument kind of became a kind of more of a dominant force in terms of like mainstream guitar and rock guitar. And um, So that was very interesting for a while too. And I got a, you know, like I said, so I played in a lot of bands, and then, and then by the kind of after I bummed around a while and kind of never really had any type of success in the music industry, I actually decided to go back to college, and then ended up going and getting working on my graduate, a doctorate in literature, and something um, not directly related, but all art is related to me.
Sure.
you know, a lot of what I do, what I did in that realm really feeds into my musical ideas and how I approach music and whatnot. But it was while I was at graduate school at UCLA that someone suggested, a friend of mine that knew someone in the Smashing Pumpkins kind of world was like, hey, they're looking for someone, and I think you should audition. And so then that became like a whole thing, doing that. And then once I joined the Smashing Pumpkins, it was like, wow, like I'm a full-time musician now, which I'd never actually been able to do. And that's a completely different luxury and lifestyle. But
That's an awesome journey, though. I mean, because my next
yeah.
question and thing, it's 2005. Billy says he's putting the band back together, and all of a sudden, '07, you're the guy. Like, what was? So this is a multi-tiered question, and I'm going to tie it into
Hmm.
something else. Take it wherever you want. So, I've interviewed Richard Fortis, who plays in Guns N' Roses, and
Yeah, yeah, I know Richard. Yeah, 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 I know
she was
Richard.
so
Yeah.
awesome, dude. I bought a divided by 13 amp off of him after the
Oh,
interview. So if you got it, if you got any gear, I'm a buyer just in case.
yeah.
um, so a similar yet different. You're in this amazing, epic, legacy group, and you're riding the journey. And then some of the original other guys come back in, but you're still there. And I think that is that's such a testament of what you're bringing to the table. But
Yeah, yeah.
what was that? So it's '07, you're out there, you're doing the thing. Like, what was that whole experience? Very few people on this planet get to stand on that stage in that capacity. So
Yeah, I'm just there's so much because now after 15 years, I have a much different perspective on the journey than I did, say, if I would have answered this question 2 years in or 5 years
sure.
in. And I realize now I had no idea what I was getting myself into. You think all those years you're a musician in training and you want that, but it's kind of joining a band with already an established history is much different than starting a band with your buddies
Sure.
and then getting signed and getting success, and you kind of growing up and experiencing it all together. This is, you go from, you have a day-to-day life doing what is, and then all of a sudden it's not a gradual shift, it's like a radical shift. All of a sudden you're like, yeah, you're in a rehearsal room practicing 6 hours, 6 to 8 hours a day. There was just so much. I mean, first of all, I'll just give like, after I got the gig, and I guess I should, I think it might be insightful to talk about like the reasons I personally think that maybe I got the gig compared to other people. I think that there was a first component was maybe a stylistic thing, which was, to be in the Smashing Pumpkins, you have to be able to play heavy really well, but you also have to be able to play, like, say, this kind of post-punk, new wavy, atmospheric guitar really well too. Plus acoustic guitar,
Right.
folk guitar, because the band really casts a very wide palette of sounds and influences. And by design, I think Billy always thought about it as like in a Zeppelin-y kind of way, where there's all different types of music that kind of fits within the concept of what is Smashing Pumpkins. And so to be able to kind of do all those things, really, what I think you have to have had grown up in a certain era where those things were exposed to you. And so I think that the fact that I was invested in all those things in a real way really helped, because I did grow up during those eras. And so I think that, I was the first person that auditioned on guitar, and so they knew, they're like, well, it can't be this easy. We feel like we have to audition other people because it just doesn't make any sense. But I think kind of what they found out after they auditioned other people, from what they told me, is that you'd find like a really good heavy player, but when it came to playing the more, like I said, this kind of new wavy, atmospheric post punk kind of guitar, like it was kind of a foreign thing to them and not really, you know, quite sure how to do it. And vice versa, you'd find like a cool alternative guitar, but couldn't really play the heavy stuff,
Mm.
you know, in the right way. And then, um, so I think there's that. There's also the fact that I wasn't a quote unquote like LA. You know, LA is full of people, and this is not a bad thing because I don't. I think that the reasons of well, first of all, if you can pay your bills playing music, that's like such a small minority of musicians that actually are fortunate enough to actually, like, you live and sustain yourself. So how you get that done, I am no person to judge, you know, but we're all different types of people. So LA, there's lots of people who move here and they're just like, hey, I'm going to audition for every gig I can get, whether it's Shakira to Smashing Pumpkins. And you know, they certainly didn't want, you know, someone not like that. So the fact that I wasn't like quote unquote a professional musician actually helped me. And the fact that I came in and I brought in my own identity, my own style, my own way of being a musician was something that was very valuable to them at the time. So I think that helped me. Yeah. So, but then once I got the gig, it was crazy because I mean I had only had I think I had maybe two electric guitars. You know what I mean? And you know, some pedals and like a '60s Fender amp, you know, which wasn't really suited for the gig. And actually, when I was auditioning, a good friend of mine actually let me borrow his Marshall head and cabinet so I could actually have something that was suitable for the audition because I didn't even have anything like that.
Wow.
So the first rehearsal, I show up and there's Les Pauls, diesel amps, you know, Bogner amps. I'd never even played through that stuff. So imagine you're showing up for rehearsal. You have a 60 songs on the proposed set list to start sifting through. You have all these guitars you've never played before and amps you've never played before, and then at a volume you've never played before. It was crazy. And it was hard. It was really difficult. But I think I can say the only thing that got me through it is I was willing to put in the work.
I love that.
You know, I told Bill, you know, because yeah, I was just struggling to survive the first couple of days, and instead, and I remember what I told him was I said, I know I'm struggling, but I said I want you, and I know you're pushing me hard just because you want me to get better. And I said, you know, I said, push me as hard as you want because I just want to improve and be the best I can be. And kind of from that moment when he knew I was willing to kind of put in like the work and do whatever it took to sound good, we've never really had a problem ever. Yeah, because we're on the same page when it came to that. But I mean, it was tough. You know what I mean? Like that first couple years of shows, I mean, we played like some like massive shows, massive audiences. I don't remember a lot of it because I was just so focused on not messing up. I was just so focused on like keeping it together, and we didn't use in-ears and stuff at the time because in-ears were still kind of new and not many people used them yet. And so we were just blasted. So it was just so loud, and I wore earplugs, but it just was such you know, the stages were so big and just so different. It just took me a lot to get used to. And so I didn't really, I can't say I really enjoyed a lot from those first couple of years because I was just trying to hold it together. So now when we play those types of shows, it's just so much fun for me because it's just I'm played, you know, thousands of gigs now with the band, and it's completely different experience for me. But at the time it was really tough, you know. So but to answer now the second half of your question, so we trudged through you know, those those years, and there was, Jimmy left the band a couple times, and so then we had new members to where Billy was the only original member left, and you know so I've been in the band since this whole time. And then I guess it's probably around 2015, 2016. um you know Billy started talking about that James may come back to the band, and I've told this story many times, but it was not a surprise because he was completely transparent about the whole thing, and he told me from the very, very beginning that even if James comes back, you're not going anywhere. So it was never a threatening situation to me. It was always only a positive situation. So it really wasn't weird at all. And once I met James, he was always completely like nice to me, and there was never weirdness. And now I would say like we're actually pretty good friends, and we just talk to each other about tons of non-band stuff, and we both live out here in LA, and so we see each other from time to time. And yeah, it's been an extremely positive situation. And I tell people this because it's something that I didn't even really recognize at first, or thought would happen, is that him coming back actually created more space for me to be myself. Because before he came back, when you're playing the catalog of songs where he was part of them, I was essentially doing a lot of his former job, which was playing a certain style, covering a certain frequency range, which really wasn't my forte. James always played a Les Paul. I didn't ever play Gibsons, which I, did once I joined the band. But now that he's back, I don't have to play those things as much. And so I was able to kind of create kind of a new sonic territory kind of in between him and Billy. And so it's actually really nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it's great. And like I said, he was so sweet and so kind. Like, I mean, he told me, he said, I'm not here to step on your shoes, and I have no ego about this, and I just want this to be a great situation for everybody. And that, and I realized that was such a mature thing for him to do. So I really, like I said, it wasn't, people always think it would be weird, and I could see from the outside why you would think that, but it actually wasn't.
That's awesome. I mean, that's as a fan of the band, and as a musician who's toured and everything, and that's what you want to hear. You want to hear the positivity.
Yeah.
I want to dig back into something from the beginning of when you got the gig and those huge tours and those first couple of years, festivals and things like that. Being that we're a school, a lot of our students are younger in their musical journey. They're towards the beginning. So, we'll book them shows. We'll do big shows for the students here. We'll put them in bands and get them out performing. And stage fright is just an epic thing that they all feel. And, I try and talk to them about mental preparation and things like that. And seeing the gig before it happens. But what was your process, then and now and in the beginning and just in general?
One thing that I've, even to this day, that I use to kind of confront stage fright is I want to feel as confident as I can before I walk on stage. And something that I never did before joining the band, but was something that was basically asked of me, was that you have to warm up before going on stage. And it seems so obvious, but I was in tons of bands. You show up to the club, have a couple drinks, hang out, walk on stage, play. Especially in the alternative '90s, where precision wasn't the big thing. And that was really an eye-opening thing. And then that became kind of a something that I really rely on, even to this day, is when I feel really warmed up. And I'm not talking like a quick, some people like, hey, like a quick 15-minute warm up. For me, even to this day, like I love to show up to the gig hours before, and I love to play for hours. And so when I walk on stage, I'm so loose. And usually what I warm up on is actually harder than almost anything that I'm going to play on stage. So when I go on stage, I feel extremely confident because I've been like forcing my brain up here, my hands, like my timing, all these things on things that are kind of stretching my playing. And so then when I go to play the gig, it's actually like a few levels down, and it feels very comfortable and almost, I don't want to say like easy, but easier than what I was just doing. And that's a technique that's been extremely effective for me, extremely effective. And then, you know, I know, and this sounds like maybe like such an obvious thing too, but especially when you try to first go on stage is to try to slow things down. And I think the best way to slow things is just remember to breathe.
Mm.
Because that's something that I would do is especially even if I had difficult passages, I realized like you're not breathing, you're not remaining in a normal bodily flow. So that's something, it's so basic, but just kind of focus on your breathing, relax. And then, like I said, that coupled with warm up really makes me, kind of like not worry about like playing on stage anymore, even though it's still those first couple minutes are always, there's like an adrenaline rush. And I think that's something that over time is something, it's really hard to replicate. I don't think you can replicate it in the practice room, is the adrenaline rush that you get when you walk on stage.
Yeah.
Because we rehearse sometimes for tours for 6 weeks and we're playing 6 hours a day, running the sets. And I feel like, man, I'm playing hard. And then as soon as the tour starts, the first couple shows, my hands are just ripped apart. Like I feel like this kind of fatigue, my nails are ripped off. And I think it's the only difference is you can't replicate what it's like to play with the adrenaline running through you.
Right.
And, and that's just something. So that's why it's so important to really try and bring yourself down as soon as you can.
I
Like,
love, dude, that is tremendous advice, because I've asked that
yeah.
question to a lot of people, and the particular thing about playing hard stuff to make the easier stuff, like no one's ever said that before. So I love that. I'm gonna start
Yeah,
telling people that.
I always find it weird. This is and I've one of the and like I said, that's just like me personally, and this is not being judgmental by any stretch of imagination, but I've had the luxury to be, sometimes you play these festivals, these really huge festivals with huge bands, and you don't really have you kind of have private dressing rooms, but they're like in a big building. And so it's just basically like office dividers kind of, And so I heard very famous guitar players warming up for their show. And it blows my mind when people play their own riffs that they're going to play like 10 minutes later, like as a warm up.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if you're warming up on that, like that's like you're not preparing yourself to play beyond that. And with Pumpkins, we improvise a bit, so I want to be like really comfortable on the instrument. And so if there's a moment where we're going and I want to be able to go for something, I want to be like, hey, my hands haven't gone there. So if I want to hit that fifth gear, I mean, I really want to be able to do it. And yeah, so like I said, to me, it just doesn't make sense to me. What makes sense to me is to always, like I said, is to play beyond what you have to do. Now we all get into those situations as a working musician where certainly you're, and this is super fun about being a musician too, is where you walk into sound check and Billy's like, hey, I want to play, Good Times, Bad Times by Led Zeppelin tonight or something. We've never played that song, but you know what I mean? And you have So you are literally backstage learning how to play the solo because you got to play it in front of 10,000 people in 20 minutes. So there are situations like that, but they're not as often as you'd think, especially for us, because the bigger shows we play, it's a very tight production.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you. That's
Yeah,
tremendous
yeah.
value in
Mhm.
that. Before I go into the gear section of this, which is a deep hole with no bottom, I always like to try and you can take this as far or as not as far as you like, but I think it's fascinating when people think of musicians, they know them as the musician. They know their work, they know what they see on stage. But I always think it's cool to know, like, do you have any daily routines? What's a day in the life of Jeff? What are you doing?
I'm an early riser,
Okay.
so I like to wake up early. And usually, what I like to do first thing in the morning is I'm a big reader. So well, I'm a big coffee drinker, number first. So it's always it's wake up, coffee, and then I usually read for a few hours and journal, right? Kind of mentally prepare myself for like the work day. And then, I have a wonderful dog. So I take read for a while. He gets up, we go for a walk, for half an hour or so. And then, and then by that time, then it's kind of start getting into musical things, because once I like to start off in this very kind of quiet way, because once the day starts, it can kind of, depending on what needs to happen, it can kind of run away from me. During the last year, we've been working on a new Pumpkins record, so it's been a lot of recording. So by 10 o'clock or so, it's get in the shower, eat, and then I was been off to a studio in the other side of town, recording my guitar tracks. And um, yeah, so that's usually what it is. But if not, then I'm either here in UCAN. This is like I'm kind of my home studio, and I'm just either practicing guitar or recording. Tons of that. Yeah, but I don't really do much other than I really focus. I really am blessed, and I really enjoy the life of being a musician. And so I just love to play. I just love to play the guitar. I play all the time, and I have a whole slew of things that I'm always kind of focused on my playing. So if I don't have anywhere to go, which I'm actually usually very happy about, it's I kind of focus on things like right now. I just picked up Jennifer Batten's book on it was called Ultra
Oh,
Intervallic Guitar Licks.
fantastic, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Dude.
because I worked on Joe Diorio's intervallic designs with my jazz lessons, and those are great. But her book is cool because it's kind of does some of those licks are very much kind of jazz vocabulary in a way, and you certainly could play them with distorted records, but her book is a little more puts you in the kind of the rock realm. So I've been working on that, working through those things, and again, and that's what's so great about having the musical background that I have, is because I got the book right here. The first section is, I think, what Mixolydian licks.
Mhm.
So if you don't know what that means, you're like, okay, if you don't know how to apply that, but to me it's great. I'm like, okay, oh, awesome. I know how to, I know what that means. So I'm learning all these things, and um, it's it. So I'm doing that, and then I'll work on like I'm always working on, like, okay, like I've spent the last like 4 or 5 years, like I really wanted to get like my alternate picking together. So I really, got out the Paul Gilbert DVDs and all that kind of stuff. And then even took a few lessons with Michelangelo when I was, because when I
Wow.
still lived in Chicago. He's a Chicago based too, and so, and we become friends over the years, and so he's been super helpful, and because I was sometimes when you're working on technique and whatnot, you get lost, and you're like, okay, I've kind of hit this plateau that I can't get over. Am I doing something wrong? And that's why having teachers is so great. I mean, the internet and books and everything are fantastic, but having someone in the room with you to go like, hey, like you got it, but look at your right hand and this, and you know what I mean, and it'll be a little bit easier. Or like, yeah, that's great that you're playing it like that, but that may come back to haunt you if you don't learn how to, you know, finger things in this way or use your pinky and stuff, you know, if you want to start doing these other things, you know. And I think that that's kind of, you know, I don't want that to get lost, because I think like I've definitely benefited from this proliferation of guitar knowledge that's out there at our fingertips. But I like I said, I love having teachers.
I love
And
that you
I
said that. Oh man.
yeah, and so like when I with like my alternate pay, I was like, I'm just gonna hit up Michelangelo and ask. You know, I'm lucky enough that, you know, I'm in a band that he's gonna answer my message. You know what I
Right.
mean? You know what I mean? So, but you know, like I said, when I was in Chicago, there's a great the Old Town School of Folk, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's like a really big music school in the
Mhm.
city, historic music school. And you know, I just signed up for a jazz class, and then the teacher was so great that I did 3 years of privates with him till I basically moved. And I think, like I said, having teachers is the best. That
Dude, like
one-on-one instruction that's tailored to what you need, there's no way you can get that. You can replicate that experience, you know. You know, and like I said, I'm not just telling you that because I'm talking to you. It's because that was really my experience.
I I appreciate that so much because
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
mean, that's aside from, yes, I'm a teacher, that's my mission statement, but that was how I learned. That's how my teachers were. And that's why I think I am the player I am. And I'll often work with a student who's watching, you know, one of the big YouTube guys, and they're teaching him how to play a D chord into an A major chord. And the fingers they're using make absolutely no sense except for the one instance of going from a D to an A. And I try and explain to him that video exists to get you to watch that video and learn, oh, wow, I'm playing guitar, but it's only for that one transition. It's going to mess you up for everything else. And it's a bad habit you're going to have forever. And please let's discuss this a bit more. And when they realize that, they're like, wow. And that comes from the dialogue, the interactivity of a person sitting across from you and saying, I don't know about that. So
Well,
very
and
cool.
as you know from having, you know, especially you get a lot of this more in jazz, but even in rock, is when you have to, it's one thing to have this passive relationship with like, okay, I'm getting this off the screen, then I turn it off, then I'm just going to sit here and work on it. And that's great. But when you're in a room with a student and teacher and you're like, okay, I'm going to play, and now we're going to play together. And you're constantly having to learn how to actually take what you're and make it musical in real time, in, you know, even if it's a duo, that's oftentimes what's really lost,
Yep.
you know. And I think that's kind of one of the potential, like say, you know, without sounding too negative, you know, harmful side effects of like this kind of let's say like social media culture of guitar, is that it's isolated.
Yes.
It's people in an idealized situation, whether or not it was sped up, um, basically lip synced, you know, guitar
Yep.
sound, I don't know what you
Yep.
call it, you know, or whatever. It's not playing live in a room in front of an
Yep.
audience with all the kind of chaos that's going on and all the different things that you have to negotiate when you're playing in that framework. And then too, you know, I think a lot of it too is you know, it's not, playing covers and stuff is awesome, you know, if that's what you want to do. Yeah, and certainly some people, some musicians out there, guitar players get paid really well to play covers, and I have no problem with that. Like I said, if you can survive being a musician, hey, that's really difficult. And I love to learn. I learn tons of songs by other people because I love to get underneath the hood of
Mhm.
what was Eddie Van Halen doing, or Steve Vai, and really now that I can kind of start playing some of these things, I'm like, oh, I really want to learn and kind of, but I think another thing that sometimes gets lost then though is really the ultimate thing is to develop your own style. If that's where you want to go with your playing, like if you want to be a musician who's known for, doing providing their own contributions to music, it's really about developing your own style. And that's something that took me, I wish that's some advice that I wish that I had gotten earlier in a certain way, because it seems so obvious, right? It seems so obvious, but it's really not, because you at some point you're just trying to gain proficiency on the instrument,
Right.
um, but really all the players that I love the most are people that have like the most unique styles, whether it's Yngwie or Steve Vai or Satriani or Kevin Shields from My Bloody Valentine or Billy Corgan or you name it. Jay Mascis from Dinosaur Jr., Thurston Moore, Lee Ronaldo from Sonic Youth, or Joe Pass on guitar. I mean, you name it, that you can hear those people, and within, 10 seconds less, you know who it is. And that's not predicated on technique or not it's predicated on like what the sound that's coming out of the guitar or the amplifier, and kind of the relentless pursuit of that is something that I wish that I had spent more time earlier in my career, doing. But I try not to get fixated on things like what I didn't do, because it's like I'm still alive, still playing. I don't care, work on it now. And so but that's something that I think sometimes is lost, because it's like you get like these very fragmented versions of playing.
Yes.
And taking that and getting out of the bedroom or wherever it is, the practice space, and out into the world, that's a difficult process. It's a very difficult process. And
you know what too is, I'll see a lot of my students is like they'll see these videos of these players that are putting stuff out on social media, and my first response is, okay, well now find that guy doing that live, and it doesn't exist because it's just these perfect scenario, they're lip syncing, whatever it is, it's all good. But I say, you have two choices. You really do. You can choose to be intimidated or you can choose to be inspired. And I always go with inspiration, because intimidation is a waste. Like, what's that going to do? Now you're not going to play guitar. That's dumb. Like, find something about what you're seeing there that makes you want to do your own version of that, because you're never going to do what that person's doing. That's that person. Let them be that person. So like you just said, man, that's finding your voice. That I'm all for that.
Yeah, that's and having the confidence to do that in an age where there's so much, like I said, with the beautiful thing about the internet is there's so much awesome information out there. Whatever path, whatever rabbit hole guitar wise you want to go down, you can find it. But then the bad thing too is you have so many people with an opinion, and many of them, sadly negative about people's playing. And that, and that's really, to me, a sad thing about guitar culture, that I if I could wish anything upon the world, is that would just disappear and let people just do their thing.
Agree.
Because it's just, it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't.
It's just bullies.
Yeah. So,
all right, I'm going to pivot us over to the gear side of things, if you will. All right.
Sure.
I see in this bigger picture, if I pan this out, I'm going to see your studio, I think. Let's see if that works. There it is. All right.
Yeah, there we go.
Now we got some stuff around us. Cool. Okay. So this is a series of rapid fire questions, this or that, all gear, nerdy stuff. Feel free to go on tangents, defend your answer, whatever you want.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Ready? Humbucker or single coil pickup?
Humbucker.
All right. Les Paul.
Yeah, I was gonna say humbucker. I mean, even though I do love single coils too, but in my main stage guitars, all things considered, I'm gonna want a humbucker.
Yeah. Like I said, all these questions, the answer is usually both. So
Yeah.
Les Paul or Strat?
Strat.
All right. Strat or Telecaster?
Strat.
All right. If you're grabbing a Gibson, would it be a Les Paul or an SG style?
Les Paul.
All
Les
right.
Paul.
Tremolo or non-trem?
Tremolo.
Cool. 22 or 24 frets?
24, and more recently in the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years started getting into 24, and now when I play 22, I'm like, oh my gosh, where'd they go?
Right.
But like all my like I'm lucky enough, that Yamaha makes me custom guitars, and so every time I get a cut, they're almost always 24 fret.
Awesome.
Yeah.
When you're grabbing a guitar pick, do you prefer a thin, medium, or heavy pick?
Heavy.
Okay.
Heavy. Yeah. In fact, over the last couple years, I've gone to heavier and heavier.
Yeah.
And lighter strings, heavier picks.
Interesting. All right. Well, that's my next question.
Oh, you got digital blur for a second there.
Yeah, sorry. So for your guitar strings, 9s, 10s, or 11s?
E natural 9s, E flat, which we played, then 10s. So yeah,
Okay.
but historically I used to use 10s for E natural, but now I've gone down to 9s. And yeah, like I said, thicker picks, lighter strings. That seems to be the better combination for me.
Cool. Sorry, things seem to be getting glitchy. I apologize. I don't know what it looks like on your end, but if you don't hear me, just let me know. For the fretboard, rosewood or maple?
Rosewood.
All right. Now this is a polarizing one. I'm sorry. What was that last part? We're like delayed here. It's all broken.
Oh, rosewood.
Okay. All right. Beautiful. Okay. This is a polarizing question. Do you prefer tube amps or amp modeling technology? And that's a two-tier question. So on a gig, it's one thing versus studio, it's another.
I guess I tend to use tube amps in live for sure. We still use amps. But I'm happy to use modeling too, and I do use in the studio. I actually use a combination of both. Because sometimes I get great things through modeling stuff, and sometimes there's no reason to change it. So because it actually just sounds good and works. So, and a lot of times on a lot of tracks I've been doing recently, there's a combination of both. Even you'd be surprised, and a lot of times you really can't tell the difference.
Yeah.
I mean, at least I can't. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's get into some effect pedal choices. If you had to choose delay or reverb?
Delay.
Okay. Fuzz or overdrive?
Ooh. Fuzz.
Okay. Phaser or chorus?
Chorus.
All right. And then just a few random band choice questions. Is it the Beatles or the Stones?
Beatles.
All right. Is it John or Paul?
Ooh. John.
Okay. All right. No wrong answers. It's okay. It's all good. Bowie or Dylan?
Bowie.
Zeppelin or Floyd?
Ooh. Zeppelin, I think. Even though I love both.
I know,
That's a
it's
tough
impossible.
one. Yeah.
All right. And then if we were in the Floyd world, is it side or the wall?
Dark Side of the Moon. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Is that what you said?
All right. Yep. Dark Side of the Wall. Sorry. It's getting really choppy.
Yeah.
I apologize. I don't
Yeah.
know. I got one more for you and then wrap it up just because I don't want it to completely crap the bed on us. If you're trapped in a desert island, you get one guitar, one amp, and one pedal. What would you take? You have endless power supply and batteries and all of that. And so
I would take a Strat fuzz face, and a Marshall plexi.
Oh, that's a fantastic combination.
Yeah, because I feel like, in there you got a lot of sounds, a lot of tone, tons and tons of, you can have clean with just the Marshall, right? If you kind of have the plexi, like not super distorted with the fuzz face, but then you also have the fuzz face with the volume down type of cleans, kind of and overdriven sounds in between. So there's a lot in there. And plus the Strat, that's what I love. There's so many tones out of a Strat.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was a well-educated question. I liked our answer, I should say. I liked how there was depth to that. Usually people just blindly just say this, and that, but that I agree entirely.
Yeah.
Well,
I never like
apologize.
to be, no, I was gonna say that's the thing is I never like to be from when I first started playing, I had very early on, I had a multi effects. I always like to have a lot of sound. So anything that's just kind of like one sound, I'm always a little bit bummed. So I'm always looking for variety.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree entirely. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for your time, dude. I'm sorry that the connection has gotten rough here. Usually when I repost it at the end, this fix this lag and things. So when this does repost, it should look better. And if it doesn't, I apologize, but the audio is on, so I can still hear the audio. And happy belated birthday, man. Yeah, it's a birthday.
Oh, thank you.
Too, so.
Yeah. No, yeah, thank you. No, it was my pleasure. I mean, anytime you want to have me, I'm always available. So.
Oh, I am known to do part 2, so we may fall more into gear stuff there. We'll just go nerd out over guitar players. We'll talk about Lick It Up, right? We're going to talk about Kiss. That's what we'll do.
We're going to go deep dive into Lick It Up.
Rob and Jeff go deep on Kiss.
Yeah, anytime.
All right, brother. Well, you stay safe out there. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, thank you. All right,
thanks,
bye.
Jeff. Bye.
Bye.